Have public comment.
We
We don't talk for that. We go through that. That's what I.
There we go.
Nice. I don't know where to sit. I didn't want to sit in Andrew's seat.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Nice.
Very
It's always very.
I don't see him on.
Always
Is
very.
Tony on?
I don't say I do want to say I
Megan
put
on?
my shirt on.
Megan's on.
Today.
Megan's on.
They fit it up.
All right, it's 4:30. We're gonna call this meeting to order. Tony's unavailable, so I guess I'm taking over, and many meetings as I've been to, I've never been a chair, so I'm gonna need help learning how to do this. We have a quorum, and the only one that is missing is Tony. I forgot everybody but Tony.
Megan, she's.
Megan's on. So tell me she's on. Do we do citizen to be heard first this evening? Okay, is there any citizen to be heard that's not here for the public hearing? Anyone?
Just
None?
Megan.
And then, do any of the members have any ex parte communications or disclosures? Except me? Okay. Approval of the 4/14/25 minutes. Have a motion. Do you want to disclose something? What do I need to disclose? That you're my daughter?
Yes. Thank you.
I thought I did. I thought
actually-
except me.
I need to disclose, I have talked to Ben Riley about some things. I don't know if he gave a letter that we had in the packet. I don't know if you others have seen that, but I got that letter from
I
him.
think I did too.
Okay, cool. That would be the only disclosure, I had with that.
But then staff, they consider staff.
Yes.
Yeah, man,
I move we approve the minutes.
for 4/14/25.
First one. I'll second.
First and second for the approval of the minutes, all in favor? Approval of the minutes for 4/28/25.
I actually have something to add with it. We figured that. Sorry.
That's okay.
I just wanted to make a note that I was actually
Oh,
in the meeting live on YouTube. Zoom was unavailable. So I was not actually absent. Maybe you could just note that.
Yep.
That was the only thing I had to add.
Move we approve the minutes with that addition.
second? Is there a second?
I wasn't there, so I probably shouldn't.
I'll second.
Are you abstaining?
I'm abstaining, yes.
All-
Okay, so who made the motion? Obi or?
Obi.
Okay, and who seconded?
Aaron.
Thank you.
And all in favor? Or is abstaining?
Just.
Okay, Chris, for sure.
And Megan.
Yes, great. Planning staff report.
I wanted to talk to you guys really quick about OTMA and email communication and why I keep making sure that we're not replying to all. So a meeting as defined by OTMA is anytime there's a quorum present, even if it's electronic, and that communication is via email. So if we're replying all, we either need to publish those emails, or the easiest solution is just to reply. So usually it's just staff giving you guys information about a meeting or an agenda or whatever. And so the replies aren't, it's not, we're not doing anything wrong. But I would just always encourage to be in the habit of just replying singular. And if you feel like you need to include someone else from the planning commission, your chair and your vice chair are always great options. So if you want to reply to staff and then include the chair and the vice chair, or just keep it under quorum, so 3, keep that to 3. And that's always appropriate. Then you're not in quorum, you're not worried about anyone saying that there's anything happening in an email that we have to worry about. I've not seen anything in any email. I want to clarify that. You guys have been great. I just want to make sure that you guys understand why I'm always saying like, please don't reply all, please don't reply all. It's just, to comply with OPA, it's just easier to hit reply so this. So keep that in mind and,
Chrissy, does that include like, yes, I'll attend the meeting, simple things like that?
I would always just reply to staff.
Yeah.
Even, and then the staff, if there's ever a question, staff will reply to everyone saying like, hey, we didn't have quorum. And then you guys can reply and let us know, just to be safe. It's just better, better practice.
I did have this very funny thought of, and I don't know if county commission does this, but oftentimes you'll be on something that says, what day is best to attend? And it influences what day I'm going to attend on the basis of other people, but I'm guessing that you'd never get in trouble for such a thing.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't, and I would also say a better practice would be to send out a doodle poll where you can see everyone's responses
Yeah.
in that kind of capacity, and then that would be published. And that's just, better practice for this body, I think, going forward. It's just something to be mindful of, and it's just, I just think it's better.
Yeah.
Then, when someone else gets hired, they might care as much as I do.
They don't know so much about legal stuff.
And then there will be an OPMA training locally, in the next few months. So Stephen and I are working on that, so we'll get that planned and, invite you all so that it's a little more substantial than just what I look for. I just am more concerned about the email.
That's a good one. I just
Yeah.
trainings.
Right, that's all I have.
Hey Trish, you're up.
Okay, this will be very quick. But I haven't seen you, we've had 2 commission meetings, I think, since I saw you last, so in the May 6th meeting, we did have a discussion on HB 256. May have to help me out a little bit, I did watch it again this morning, but that relates mostly to the ability, you can use the listings, right, for Airbnb, VRBO, we can actually use the listings as evidence that they have an overnight accommodation, so what will I say as far as the commission coming to some consensus? I don't know. It was,
It was great. The commission basically granted staff the ability to. They just said we can start citing people for overnight accommodations violations, and that has started. Brandon has drafted a letter. We are starting to send those out. And hopefully we can get some people into come to compliance with their overnight accommodations.
right, because it relates to business licensing, it relates to tax revenue, right? So all of the above and maybe if they are not in the right zone, maybe they'll just become a long-term rental, right? Instead of doing overnights if they, so yeah, it was good. It was a good discussion. Okay. And then, as far as the 20th, we really had nothing related to planning and zoning other than there was an item on the consent agenda, non-conversion of, agreement on a Nissan property, and I asked that that be pulled off so that P and Z could give us kind of a little overview on what that means and what it means for the commission to sign that. And that was it. 'Cause it was on, yeah, that stated that it was on the commission, the consent agenda. What?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, there you go. Now you know. I pulled it. If that's okay. And it's supposed to be on the next agenda. Sorry, there you go. Do you want me to put on the agenda? I can't. I got it. All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing. I asked that everybody have a phone, if they please turn it off. And then we don't have a big audience, but sometimes that can be a problem. Do you want to make the presentation first and then?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and talk about it and then, we'll open public comment and then you guys can discuss it. As long as the chair feels good about that, okay. So you guys have had ample time to look at this, I believe. Sent this out a couple weeks ago, just to clarify a couple things, that maybe aren't as clear. So exhibit A is the actual land use code. The changes are as related to things that happened in the workshop, things that happened in prior workshops, and then, it mostly has to do with definitions. There are a couple things that the county commission wanted added to this. Those relate to, in the section, the ownership. But a couple of you guys have reached out about the, they want to open up ownership. Well, it's something that we're going to discuss, and we want your opinion on this, opening up ownership to people who aren't necessarily local. Occupancy would remain actively employed household, that's defined in the land use code. But one of their requests was to open up ownership to people who do not live here. And so that's one of the main things that we really need, that the planning commission should think about making a recommendation on. The language that is, section 2, number 2. It's highlighted in yellow. The owners of an HGH2 unit and the property was under control of an HOA, etc. That was something that was sort of a compromise that planning staff came up with. It's not something that has been blessed by the commission. It was just an alternative to opening it up completely. I think that, you know, the commission wants to open it, has made the recommendation to open it up. This was just
And this is where they're upping it up 50%, right?
well, that was the compromise that planning staff came up with. So that, you know, 50, they would open it up slightly, but not all the way. And that language does need to be worked on, as pointed out by some of our great partners at HASU. But it is complicated language that I think I've worked it out, but I'll have to speak with our legal counsel on land use issues for the county.
And that's on page 14 of 15. Is that right?
14,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Number I.
yeah, so. Essentially what that's supposed to do, just to make sure that everyone understands, is in a property that is controlled by an HOA or some such. Instead of opening it up all the way, you know, if they're owner occupied, if there's a contingency in their HOA or in their, you know, occupancy agreements that 50% are owner occupied, that we could open it up a little bit so that those could be purchased by someone outside of Grand County. Instead of just removing ownership requirements completely.
Right, and that's separate from residents. Right? You're talking ownership, not residents.
Ownership, if they live there, the owner occupied,
Okay.
they would have to be owner occupied 50%.
Yeah.
And that is required by condo to get financing from a condo, although they do define what an owner occupant looks like. It could be a second home or something, but that's not, doesn't speak to this. It's just,
But only 50% have to be actively employed households. Is that right? How's that work?
no, so 50, everyone to occupy it, you'd have to be active 100% or, well, 80% actively employed house, or sorry, 80% would have to be occupied by actively employed household.
Okay,
50% of the entire complex could be, has to be owner occupied.
okay.
As I'm trying to say it, it gets
Okay.
confusing. I think I have to make myself a Venn diagram to really understand.
Yeah. I've got that diagram.
I think you guys got it.
Didn't not reading it though.
Right, no, I mean, and it's a hard thing to articulate, particularly in something like this, so. that language, like I said, needs to be worked on. I think that, oh, it's the deed restriction. We've explained what this sort of extra document being added is. So. Trying to think of how to, the best way to explain this. I don't want to speak down to you guys, because I think you guys all understand, what a final plat is and how it works. And once something is recorded, that's vested. Those encumbrances are on the property. The only way we can change that is by superseding it or doing an amendment, right? So with most of these being sold, or half of them being sold, we would have to have every owner sign a new plat and have it recorded. This would be something that they could voluntarily agree to, as opposed to, so that these can be implemented on these properties that have already been sold, that are no longer under a development agreement, that exists with encumbrances from the recorder's office on their plat. Does everyone understand that? My mouth right up as I was talking. Does everyone understand what this, the purpose of this now, or do I need to go into that a little bit more?
Why don't you go into a
Okay.
little more detail?
So imagine you purchase a car. You purchase a car and and your interest rate is 4%. And then a law comes out a year later and says that you can't have an interest rate more than 3%. You're in a contract for 4% and nothing you can do changes that unless you sign a new contract. This is your new contract. Right? Because otherwise, because we're dealing with land use and not a contract for a car, everyone who is in that plat would have to sign that plat and have it re-recorded. In a property that has 50 owners, that's a lot. And if one person says, I don't want it, then everyone is out of luck. So this was my answer to that, and that's why this suddenly exists where it used to not. This is also a voluntary agreement, so if someone wants the encumbrances on their property as is, they can just keep living in that world with the plat. This would only apply to each parcel of real property.
So each person, each subdivided parcel
Would enter into this.
separately?
Yeah, that's the only way I could, that's the only way I could come up with making this work in a way that didn't require every owner of a parcel that has already been divided, has already been recorded, and they've been living in it for 3 years to have to all sign a new plat. We're dealing with Thompson if we have to do that. And if we want this to work, if we want these to actually be able to be enforced countywide, that's something this is what we have to do.
Is this specifically to the HDHO housing?
Yeah, I mean, this is, yeah. So the 20% that have just been sold, this doesn't matter. It would just be the HDHO parcels.
So this is specific to all the people who are currently vested have one of these, right? Like the houses that are out there that are,
That already, yeah,
They're
they're
vested with this?
encumbered by what's on the final, no, they're
Already.
encumbered by what's on the final plat.
okay, I see.
So because we have to supersede that final plat, we need something that can,
Yes.
or we have to record a new final plat. Which
Yeah,
is,
how much do you see that happening? How much time, do you think that's gonna happen a lot?
well, I don't know any other way to make this
No, I mean, do you
go
think
into effect.
the changes to the HDO, once this happens, the HDHO, there'll be a lot of changes in the subdivisions, so these are gonna come into play? So what you're saying?
What I'm saying, so what I'm saying is in order for, so because those final plats are already recorded,
Yes.
those encumbrances are on those property, they purchased those.
Yep.
So nothing changes that
Okay.
unless we go in on top of it and change it either by reporting a new final plat or entering this on top of the
And the
property.
applicants, I mean, the property owners are actually gonna be those.
They're the ones who are
applicants
gonna
that will
be,
doing it.
yeah, they're gonna have to come to us and say, hey, we want to enter into this voluntary agreement with the county so that we can use this, the land use code, that we are changing instead of what is encumbered already on their final plat that's already been recorded. I knew that was gonna be a little bit complicated, and I hope that has been.
So what happens to the final plat? If all they're going to be doing is changing this way?
Well, this would be property by property, so once,
Oh, I see.
so, cause a final plat is reported by the developer. And then they are purchased,
So
so
these are all
this would go on top of each individual property.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense? Why, and why I had to do it that way? I couldn't think of any other way unless I was just gonna make all of these HDHO properties come in with 50 of their owners and sign a new plat and
And-
have that recorded.
Can you kind of talk a little bit about consensual lien, what that means
Yeah, so.
and how that works?
Yeah, so that is just, an interest in the property. Usually it's associated with money or a loan, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be associated with any encumbrance on the property. So with that, we would have to clear the lien before the property could be conveyed to someone else, before it could be sold to someone else. There's no money associated with it. It would be something that they would voluntarily agree to.
And, when it says here, creating favor of the county, that is the agreement you guys have with HASU, right?
Hmm.
Where
Which
it's,
section?
yeah, the section, it says the same thing, in any where it says restrictions and creating in favor of the county, and the county has to do any kind of signature. That's essentially the agreement you have with HASU. The county has with HASU. When signature by the county on any of these agreements,
Oh,
who is the?
who is the signatory? So the signatory of the signatory authority of the county is always the chair of the commission. So this would just be something that the commission would sign off on. It wouldn't have to go to a commission meeting. It would just be an agreement. Signatory authority changes by election, changes all the time, but signatory authority of the county is granted in the policy of the county. And so that's who would sign this.
So it goes through that whole process to get to the point where they're.
Yeah,
their
it would just be.
agreements are changed with this part.
And this would be sort of, I sent this off, it's associated with the land, with what's in the land use code, but it's sort of secondary. It's just a way that we don't have to amend a bunch of plats.
And the reason I'm asking all these questions is I really have never understood HTHO. Still learning that.
You guys,
Yeah, I always had a question about, like, right now, HDHO units are restricted by the land use code, but there's no deed restriction.
no, there's a deed restriction recorded on the
Okay.
plat.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, so the land use code is what granted us the ability to
Do that.
put the deed
Okay.
restriction on there, and this land use code is what grants us the ability to go into this with people.
Okay,
And yeah, so instead of, this was just like a simpler way of dealing with, making sure that the encumbrances previously recorded could be, changed or amended to the current land use code without having to go through an entire, public hearing process to.
so
Yeah,
the.
well, do you guys have any?
The other question, so Ronnie sent an email out questioning the consensual lien thing. So how do you feel that, like, if we're voting on something, right, like you've written this
Mhm.
up, does it need another legal review?
Yeah, it'll go through another legal review, like Stephen has looked at it.
Okay.
He has some changes that don't incorporate this, I sent this to everybody,
Uh-huh.
they're minimal. This will, after we kind of figure out what you guys wanna do, it'll go through full legal review with Bart and Stephen. And then that is what will,
So we're not passing a recommendation, we're trying to hammer out. the
you're passing a recommendation,
Okay.
but you can make, you can make a recommendation based on, like with this change or something like that.
Okay,
This is. I don't think that, I mean, this is a consensual agreement. This is an agreement that we're not making anyone, they're voluntarily signing this. We're not forcing someone to sign it. So. They bought the property with, certain encumbrances. This alleviates those encumbrances.
okay.
So. It's just, legal review will be, working on some language and stuff.
Yeah, and then one of the concerns was about this consensual lien.
Mhm.
And about how that, like lenders don't like that, right? Like that's what Rarni was saying in her email. It's like, lenders allow standard property enforcements and remedies such as liens, subordinates to a lender's lien. Court
Yeah,
orders.
there is a language in here that speaks to,
Yeah,
this, them being the, a. I don't remember what it was.
so you feel like you remedied that concern?
I mean, I think that, you know, we can do some more work, but I don't. I don't think that what this says, limits. What's in there, what, like her concerns, maybe that does, I don't see that. Because if there's no money associated with this, and it's, you know, voluntary.
Okay. And then, I guess, for us, I mean, the major sticking point's the 50-50. So,
Or removing the ownership completely, which
Yeah.
was something that was, you know, heavily discussed,
This is-
or leaving it.
Can I make a comment before you guys start to answer?
Oh, well, we need to public hearing.
Yeah, we,
before
well, I have to
Sorry.
open up a public hearing first.
Yeah.
But you can,
Is that okay?
Well,
I just felt like there was a statement made that to me is not correct. I mean, so would it be possible to clarify that statement?
what's the,
About the commission would, you know, a change in ownership requirements.
certain members of the commission asked
Okay, thanks.
specifically, not the commission generally,
Okay.
sorry. Certain members of the commission were adamant that we work on the ownership requirement. I should have clarified that, and I think, you know, I'm sorry that I.
Sorry, and I wasn't picking on you, I just wanted to make it clear that the commission made no, you know, vote and sent you guys a directive.
okay.
So that was bothersome.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Chrissy,
All members of the commission.
Chrissy, my understanding is that, the wording in here that we just referenced is in regards to that request by the commission.
Yeah, so, yeah, there's two sort of, I have an alternatively, so I have the language that I was like my, the compromise language, and then there's an alternatively, which is just remove ownership from that, from this qualified households.
Right.
And it would just be the use and occupancy of HGHO lots and units shall be limited to qualified. And that ownership would be just completely removed, and then that would deal with what certain members of the commission are asking.
Okay.
So would staff feel comfortable with the way it's written in here currently, or you've got some changes you wanna make?
I mean, I think that this is it's a policy decision, and I think that this needs to be, something that is discussed by planning commission and thought about. I can give my opinion, I don't know if you guys want it, but,
Yeah.
I
Staff recommendation?
I think that this was intended and designed for local ownership, local occupancy. I think that I stand by that. I think that that's what, that was its intent. I do think that opening it up isn't the worst idea. I do think housing is an issue. I think that if we are gonna opening it up all the way is. I don't love that. But again, it's a policy decision that you guys get to recommend. It's a policy decision for the commission. It's easy to say that from the outside when you have a place to live.
Mikkel, since you've been working with this probably most that she has, how do you feel about it?
I mean, the folks that participated in this knew what they were getting into when they did it.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't know exactly how it was all gonna shake out. And so I think there's room for a little bit of wiggle room. It makes me nervous to think that an outside entity could come up and buy all of Desert Soul for example, and then, say they were only renting whatever it is, 80% to local workforce. But the rent was so high that they couldn't rent it out to anybody, and then they would be back to us saying, now we want to open this up for something else because it's still not working, and then when we'd be going through this process again, and there's not a mechanism in place to make sure that it's not affordable housing. It's just based on
Ownership.
where you work. So, when it's ownership, then you know your local folks are gonna get to purchase it. So,
Thank you.
I have, yeah, that's why you're doing it.
One thing I would just like to say, as far as public comments, when I checked today at 4, we had one, from Ben at Hasu. And he is here, so I'm sure he will make a public comment as well. And you guys, I think we're all on that, so you've all seen it. That will be added to the packet as well. But I have not seen any other review. Yeah,
I checked.
and I did a test to make sure that it was working correctly. So I've seen them. But
All right, then are we ready to open the public hearing? Public hearing's open at 5. If anybody wants to speak, they can, I don't know everybody's names, but.
First, I gotta pick up my kid at 5:30, so if you guys are going long, I might
And you have the best of most, so.
dip out. Come back with a 2-year-old, and that should be fun.
Pick up Chrissy's kid and bring him here too.
Well, thanks, Chrissy, for, I feel like, well, I'm gonna echo what I said in my email. I'm gonna echo what Chrissy and Mikkel said. I think generally speaking, we are in favor of a lot of the changes that are in here, opening up the definition of actively employed household. Lessening the remote work requirement, letting people that have lived here for 2 years that are contributing to the county, being that, including making the local area bigger, reducing the hours, all that kind of stuff kind of is totally fine with us. And I think it's good. I talked about a minor issue in my email about wanting to make sure that owners aren't retroactively qualifying their renters for the past year. So the way that the deed restriction was changed makes it worded so, and it's kind of contradictory, I think, to the loop. So I think that needs a little bit of work from Chrissy or Steven or somebody like that. So that way, we just want to make sure that we're proactively making sure that they qualify before they move in, and not just saying, okay, once a year, owner, who were your renters for the last year? And then when we get those back, we're like, oh, well, this guy wasn't a renter, or he wasn't an actively employed household, he shouldn't have been here. What do we do then? Not sure. So that's that's an issue. That's kind of a minor issue. I feel like the county probably generally agrees with that, and that's just some word language that needs to be cleaned up. But the big issue, as Chrissy and Mikkel were mentioning, is the ownership and the buyer, and who's an actively employed household, who's a qualified household. This whole condominium HOA thing of exempting, I mean, essentially as it reads now, from my understanding, and I think there's going to be some rewrite, is to get some clarity on who is the purchaser. Is the buyer an actively employed household? Because that is the crux of the matter of, like, is it a local that is buying it, or is it just a local that has to occupy it? So so somebody from Vail, can they buy a unit and then just rent it to a local person? That increases the rental market, but I don't think it was the intent of the HDHL program to have outside forces drive up prices. And as Mikkel was saying, that's what happens. I mean, that's the reason that we're in the predicament that we are. It's because we have outside buyers that have a lot of money that can purchase homes for what's more than what the local wages, can get people to buy a house, right? So that's why our median house price is 800, 900,000, whatever it is, right? So when you allow outside economic forces to purchase a unit, that will drive up costs. There's more competition. So I'll pretty steadfast, I was around when this was made the run, and all the public hearings and comments for that, to basically make this a secondary market. You know, that was always that was a term that was coined, I guess, during that time, was that this was supposed to create a secondary market where people that live and work in Grant County, locally employed households, actively employed households are the only people that can purchase these units. Therefore, developers who were given a density bonus were then able to, they were given the density bonus and then they were restricted to selling it, or they were restricted to building a product that only Grant County people could afford. You know, we have lower wages, we have service sector economy, we have lower wages. The thought was that we're gonna provide the secondary market so that people from Grant County can afford that. So the way that's worded now, and you know, it's kind of, you know, we're talking about condominiums and HOAs and stuff like that, you know, it really kind of boils down to flats and Desert Soul. And I have a couple extra comments to that I'll address a little bit later, but the way that's written right now, anyone from outside can purchase it as long as they're an owner occupant. So that means that somebody from Vail can still buy a unit in an HDHO or a HOA. And, you know, this is very hard to understand. So like, even like when I'm trying to relay it to you and Chris is trying to write it, and I'm trying to like spend my whole day with Matt, trying to like bicker back and forth about what it says, it's still hard to understand.
Just quickly, so one of the criticisms of the HDHO was when you first developed the project, that if you limited it to local, it was tough to get finance for it, right? And so you would also, and I'm not taking sides in this,
Yeah.
you'd also say that you shouldn't have outside financing to do the project, or it'd be okay to have outside finance?
No, I mean, outside financing is fine to create the project. I'm not saying anything against that. And I will also, I guess I have this in my notes, but I just kind of went off in a different direction quicker than I thought. Yeah, is that Ronnie will speak to the lendability to a little bit. I mean, if it were me and I were you, I mean, I think the lendability issue is the most important issue of everything. I mean, that and the ownership are the two big ones. But you know, if you look at Murphy Flats, the number one issue I would say, and maybe Courtney and her team would have a different thing, you know, but we discuss a lot with them, is that their buyers cannot finance them. That is, I think, has been the biggest impediment of HDHO. Not that I can't find a buyer, not that I can't find a qualified buyer, it's that I can't finance these projects and people can't get the financing they need. So, you know, number one, what I would do is I would work with Ronnie and I would get the lendability figured out. I mean, I think, to me, you do that first and you don't worry about anything else. You know, I know there's people on the county commission that want a lot of changes that I think will drastically change the program. But I'm of the opinion that I think lendability is the number one issue. And if you're gonna do anything, solve that before you basically abolish the program to an extent, which is what these changes will do. Because they take away that local ability to be the only ones to purchase it, because they will not be the only ones to purchase this, and they won't even be able to purchase it because of people from other places are able to purchase it. It's gonna drive prices up, and we're gonna be in the same situation that we were. So if it were me, I mean, I would want to be spending my first, you know, like, let's fix this lendability issue. Let's, you know, go back and forth with Ronnie, let's talk to lenders and let's find out what the issue is there, because I think that's the biggest impediment before you start chopping up HDHO into who qualifies and who the ownership is and all that stuff. And, you know, I would again argue that the intent was for locals to be able to purchase, and before you take that away, even 50%, you know, which I think is the intent of that change. You work on the lendability first and then see what happens. Because I think a lot of things have happened that have made HDHO not work, lendability being a big one. But also the housing market, interest rates went up, you know, like I think a lot of people, you know, people are crying because units aren't, not crying, it's not the right word. People are, you know, but the housing market is just, you know, interest rates go up, it's depressed sales. So I also think that generally there's market forces that have changed the outlook on HDHO. So yeah, I don't have much else to say other than, you know, I think the intent was for actively employed locals to be able to purchase the units, and you know, the lendability is certainly something that we all agree with and that we all think that is primary number one to solve, and then let's see how it works, or, you know, make these changes to the actively employed, to the definition of actively employed, no big deal. You know, remote workers, if they're living in the community for 2 years, they're contributing, sure, no problem. Let's include Green River and Blanding, no problem, but I'm really here as my focus is making sure that locals are the ones that are able to buy it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing and generally I wouldn't let somebody go on. alone.
Oh, sorry, is there
But
time?
no,
on
no,
that?
no, there is generally a 3-minute time period,
Okay.
but because you are associated with everything here, I really needed you to say what you
Okay.
said.
And he was asked a question. I was ordered
It was too bad.
to.
I kind of, we're not in a workshop now. I let it go. But I also want, I don't know if this is a question or just a comment that I'm gonna make. And it's about the lendability, and I totally understand it and recognize it. But the planning commission and the county council and the county in general, we are not real estate agents or bankers. That's all our job is to do, is to write an ordinance to allow that to happen. I don't know if we need, as a planning commission, to discuss the lendability. But, and I can help it, but I don't think we, as a commission, are a real estate agent, and the
Yes.
county's not a real estate agent.
Mary, I guess unless something in the ordinance is causing the
Yeah.
issue.
That's right.
Which it is, sorry, if I can speak, I mean, that's Ronnie, it will, I think, provide comment, she sends an email to you guys as well, I think, and.
All
I
right.
mean, if you're trying to make the HDHO program better, you want to
Oh, I totally
fix the
agree with that,
lendability
but-
issue.
Right.
And I think, Ronnie is very happy and she's been very committed and engaged in these subcommittee meetings to like help that, so.
All right,
Since we already broke the rule, of asking you a question, you said it was
Happy to answer it.
lendability was something that you'd recommend that we look into. Was there another thing?
I mean, it comes down to lendability and who can be the purchaser, who's the buyer, who is it, whether or not it needs to be an actively employed household. I mean, I think. Where this is coming from is that I think there are people on the county commission that think that we should open up. To allow anyone to purchase, with the thought being that if you allow more money to come in, you're gonna get more projects done. But that money's not gonna be going to locals, it's gonna be going to whoever buys it. Now, the renter still has to be a qualified applicant, it still has to be somebody that like lives and works here, that lives in the unit. So in theory, you get more rental units out of that because you have more money, so more projects get built, so you have more rental pool essentially. But I would again argue that the intent was to provide a homeownership model for Green County residents.
And just to clarify, nothing else can be built because it's sunsetted.
Right.
So, but there's nothing else that's going to be built on with this.
Which is the reason we're here.
thank you.
So I'm Ronnie Schultz with Primary Residential Mortgage. And yeah, the HDHO, I don't think anybody is, we just want to improve it. We do want to make it lendable. We do want to, we want to improve the program. So more active, the employed units can be occupied and bought, sold, all the things. You bring up a really good point when you talk about lendability and you're not a real estate agent, you're not a lender, you're not any of those things. I'm not a lawyer. So I brought up the exact same questions in a different way than you did when I sent my email out. I can pick through this. I can have meetings with regional underwriting and go over it as well. We can see what we see, but again, we're not lawyers. So I can't tell you if Freddie and Fannie and all the other agencies are going to, whatever changes you decide to make, are still gonna lend on these. The major issue that we have is you have to keep it very simple. When there is a loan on a property, the lender owns that property. They have the rights to the property. And in multiple places in these documents, if you read them, the question on the table comes into place. It says multiple places that Grand County has the right to remedy, revoke, do all these things. So the question becomes, do they have the rights over the lender? Because if they do, you're never going to get lending on these properties. That's the issue. So I'm encouraging you to go through each and every one of these, take a look at it and keep that in your mind as you're looking at these and saying, oh, okay, if there's a loan on it, the lender has the rights to that property. Grand County does not have the rights to that property. but a lot of your documents say that there is. So, for instance, let's talk about the deed, the new deed restriction, the voluntary deed restriction. I like it. I think this is, yeah, I agree. I'm in agreement with this. The one thing that I question, however, is the consensual lien. So if you're unaware really what that means, what a lien really means, so if the lender liens a property, we're in first position. So if there's a foreclosure, we're in first position, we're getting paid first. So this lien is saying, hey, there's no monetary thing, but let's say the owner pays the property off. Our lien is now done. It's off there. This consensual lien moves into first lien position. Borrower comes back, or owner to that property comes back 2 years later and says, hey, I want to do a cash out refi. Okay, great. We do it. Now a subordination agreement has to come into place. We're not taking second lien position to this lien. We will always be in first lien position. So if you don't have anybody on your staff that's going to do a subordination agreement, that's one thing you need to figure out, is who is gonna do that. So you're assuming the chair is always gonna do it. What's the time frame? Do we have to wait a month to get a subordination agreement? Do they even know what they're signing? What are they doing with that? So that is definitely something that I would be looking at too. And I would be asking, you know, and this is things you guys aren't gonna be able to answer these questions. This is where your legal is gonna have to come in.
Yeah.
We need some lawyer. We need a lawyer. We need somebody that can give us direction and say, how does this work? Can you provide us with something that says, hey, it automatically goes, you know, it'll always be subordinate to the lender's lien? So no paperwork is ever done. So when somebody reads that, say, no, it automatically flows over. Or do you need a separate subordination agreement? So, so some of that, I don't love that terminology in there on that, because again, it does say that word. You brought it up in that as well. Creating in favor of the county's right to redeem. So you probably need to get some legal advice on that. And then under the remedies in that section, I noted on that does the county actually have the right to evict a person?
Okay, I'm going to stop that right now because this, I'm just,
Yeah.
the discussion part of
Yeah.
it. Because what we're discussing is, the deed restriction there.
Mhm.
This deed restriction is not law. What our public hearing is about is the regulations that we're writing for the ordinance.
Yep.
So, this deed restriction information probably is something that needs to be
Leave.
reviewed and discussed separately, because if that's the concern you're having.
Well, that's not all of them. That's just
Okay.
in this one. So I was
Alright.
questioning the deed
Well,
restriction part of that.
This is the ordinance that we're.
Yes, yes. So as you work on over into that one then, so on that one, what I question is, again, there's some comments in there that, and this is just what my regional and I, when you get to the enforcement section, it starts to ask, and so what we really want to know as a lender, so again, this is gonna come from your counsel, is does Grand County have the legal right to force a sale of a property that has a lien on it? Probably whether it has a lien or not, can Grand County enforce that? Under your legal action, under enforcement, under there, same thing, clarifying if Grand County has the legal right to foreclose on a property that has a lien on it. So that's terminology that's in this. You know, it says right now that. Well, I'm just going on kind of what you have in here, like there's words in there, it says that in what you have written. So we need to be something that just needs to be reworded, taken out of there, so legal advice on that.
What section are you reading from, the legal action?
I am in, so,
4711.
Yeah.
One.
yeah.
That's where I am.
So at first, it's under C, under enforcement there, just above 4.7.11. So above that enforcement, it's the first paragraph there. So it's basically, you know, it's telling you in that section, you know, so again, I'm asking in that section, do you have the right to force a sale of a property Or does Grand County have that right? And then under legal action, which is part B. I'm questioning, it has the word in the last paragraph there, foreclosures. So including judgments, liens, and foreclosures and other appropriate actions for injunction relief of damages. So, you know, you might want to take a look at that. And then under the remedies, part C, you know, can Grand County expel or evict a property owner or tenant? So I think you just kind of need to know your rights and stuff as far as what you can and can't do on
When-
there to make it lendable,
Okay,
because that's what we're having problems with.
When the remedies, the enforcement, and it talks about the county, is that when, isn't HASU the department that the county uses to do this work?
Well, no, sort of. So the agreement with HASU is just to, implement programs to get people qualified. If we needed to resort to legal action, that would be done through the county attorney's office. And it would be, you know, filing in court and, you know, I think, you know, appropriate legal action in the first sentence, like the county attorney's office isn't going to, do something illegal. And it's gonna go through court, like, you know, it's gonna be a judge ruling on it. I understand what your concerns and I can see where some of this can be, worded better.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all the lenders are really saying is who.
It's just it's
Who's
just
first
when we actually
second?
say.
Yeah,
Because there are times where, you know, if there's no loan, we would, as the consensual lien holder, be able to.
well, and should that be, I mean, should it just kind of be blanket if you don't have a lien or you have a lien on it, should it be the same, should it be different, what should that be? You know, so that's maybe something to look at the legal, I would probably want it just to be the same, because it keeps it easier, whether they have, you know, a loan on it or not. So that's all my recommendations are, is really get legal counsel somewhere in there. When you get to the enforcement and the remedy section, that is what the lenders are having problems on. It's very clear to lenders that you guys are saying, no, Grand County can do all these things to remove a property owner from the property. And what does that look like for a lender? We're not gonna allow you to do that. We're just not gonna lend on it.
Well, the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chrissy, the wording in here specifically states the appropriate legal action. So it wouldn't just be the county going in and saying, hey, we don't like what you're doing. It's the process, going through the legal process to process it correctly. Yes, the county can go in and evict people. If I own a piece of property and I don't want them in my house anymore because they're tearing it apart, I can go to the county or get an attorney and go that route. To me, that's what this is saying. And if I'm wrong, let me know, Chrissy.
So I think that from, you know, from my standpoint, when I'm writing something, I try to include everything. So that's why it says including, but not limited to.
Yeah.
So those words are sort of, it's just something that I'm used to writing. And that would have to be a Stephen decision on how he feels about removing it. It's just something that, you know, when I write something, it's always, that's the way I do it. Stephen did make some changes to the, some suggestions to this, so I don't believe that was you know, but I'll talk to him about it and we can.
Yeah.
So all of that is
I mean, those are-
specifically just to make sure that everything that's in this ordinance will legally be binding. I don't think they're gonna try and make problems. It's not their point. It's not the point of the ordinance, you know, it's to make
Correct.
problems.
Correct.
But once again, the county's not a real estate agent.
Yeah, and so if I'm hearing correctly, we can remove some of that language, it's gonna make it easier for people to get money lent to them. So
And
if it is, the county can take appropriate legal action. And you'll be better in saying that, that might be better for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we want the county to be able to do, I mean, we want the program to work, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the county needs to be able to take whatever legal action they want to be able to take. but they have to remember. If the lender has the rights to that property, so who supersedes what?
Yeah.
You know, cause anytime you guys try and do that, we're just not gonna lend on it.
Okay.
So,
So it's.
and make it very clear, because it gets, you know, you try and read through this and you're reading it, and then all of a sudden you're in a different spot and you're like, wait, it's contradicting somewhere in here. So I would really recommend going through it and make sure it is clear. It can't be questioned somewhere in there. Somebody can't open it up to their own interpretation. It is clear language, what can and cannot be done.
Well, this all goes through the attorney in the process of subdividing and ownership and.
Yeah.
One thing for the commission to think about, and I don't know if this is appropriate for me to bring it up during public comment, but. So enforcement, some of this section has to exist to speak to development as well. And this is a sort of issue that I've been having, trying to draft this. Yes, it speaks to lendability, but it also has to speak to development. And these are on the ground, so that does, but if we open this back up, I'm trying to create language for two separate events that are occurring simultaneously often. Because, you know, if something is being built currently, which they are, I have to be able to enforce that in some way. That I'm also trying to remove language to enforce lendability, but it only exists in one place in the land discuss. So those two things are fighting, and it's why I've had such a hard time drafting this, is because it's trying to do, you know,
Two things.
enforce, you know, being able to do code compliance for development, enforce things like an SIA and COO and things like that, while simultaneously making this lendable. So that is something to think about when, so that's
All right,
complicated.
thank you.
You're welcome. So, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions or help. However.
This is the public hearing and all we're supposed to do is listen.
I did send an email, so you do have the email and some of my notes in there.
But it's important.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's something we needed to understand, because like I said, this is one of those ordinances that, yeah,
It's true.
it's hard, it's really true. Is there somebody else in also? Somebody that knows this ordinance.
Okay, hi, my name's Caitlin Myers. Speaking. I don't know who I'm speaking for today. I'm not speaking, I'm the chair of the housing task force, been involved with the county housing subcommittee. Not speaking on behalf of the entire task force. I think in large part, immediately I'll say I have a different perspective from Ben Riley on the ownership thing. I think this is my kind of like trying to understand how like this 50-50 split works. Versus the 80% of, I think in general, this concept of trying to open up a portion of HCHO restricted for occupancy, opening up a portion of that to be owned by outside investors, I believe is the best compromise from, I think through this whole process of being involved with HCHO, I've never seen anyone change their minds about how they feel philosophically about the ownership question. And so that's just kind of my take, is I think having some balance of within that 80% that is required to be HCHO, having a portion of that, the majority of those units be still within the ownership occupancy use, but opening up a portion of that to be owned by outside investors is a good compromise. As we've been working on this code, I very intentionally said, I'm not gonna make a strong stance on this issue. That's up for US County to decide. But just from my perspective, the city went through their active employed household, intentionally focusing on occupancy. So I'll just leave that. It's that. I think even within that, I agree with Ben's comments. I think that we have looked at a lot of other things that are also kind of clarifying and loosening up. The code, so for employment, Ben kind of touched on this. A lot of this is kind of incorporating some of the language that we use within the community land trust lot ground lease. Our process and everything we're doing is even that much more strict and more complicated in many ways than this. So all this to say, if it's clear, it's able to move forward. If it's not clear, I think that's where a lot of the hiccups are. It's not because the land trust is subsidized by the federal government or anything like that. I think that we just have clear procedures. So that's something that I'd encourage you on, but I agree with Ben. I think even considering the occupancy part or the ownership part, this proposed language opens it up so that if you have been living, if you have primary residency for 2 years and you are employed in the community, even if it's not local employment, you are now qualified as a qualified household. I think that's another compromise. With this code, it also reduces primary residency for ownership from 9 months to 183 days, which is 1 day over half the year. And for rentals, it's dropping from 6 months to 3 months. So that also creates more flexibility in occupancy. It opens up local area. So I think that there are a lot of things that are based on feedback within the subcommittee that we heard from Murphy Flats folks, that they were also struggling to find people. So we have addressed a lot of those other things outside of this question about like the split of ownership. So that's something to keep in mind as you're considering opening that up and how you want to negotiate through that. I think for lendability, I'll just kind of echo, like I've been trying to support Chrissy, like Ronnie and I have been providing language and kind of dropped off for the last couple of months, so I'm sorry about that. But trying to advise on that, I kind of agree. I think the lendability, the county is looking at, and something that I've been trying to support Chrissy through is the bank your lender has like a longer term interest than a developer hopefully will ever have in that project. And so the way we deal with it at the land trust, and I think the direction that we're trying to go with this deed restriction is you need to kind of spell out a process for foreclosure for the bank to be able to bow out. And so with that, even for our properties, if a property goes, so we have second position. So kind of talking about this consensual lien, the bank still has first position over the community land trust. And so for us, that's more, the comment more is on the structure of how you support and make sure that people are in compliance as they're living there, instead of dealing with the headache of trying to deal with foreclosure after. Because within the land trust structure, if a property goes into foreclosure, and we can't use our first right to get it back, then we just, that house is lost from the trust as well. And that's something that we just kind of had to be subordinate to in order to lend on. And so I think a lot of this outside of code language, but something that I think would be really important is for the county to continue to work with the housing authority on how, like what the actual structure is. I think that that's also part of the reason why there's ties to HOAs, and like the more that there's like a community or a smaller structure within HDHO projects, the easier it's going to be to kind of make sure that you're up on compliance. Yeah, so that's outside of code, also important. I think if there's anything else, but yeah, those are kind of the big things. I think that it's exciting to see this move forward. Thank you for all your time that you're putting into this. I think compromise is important, and I agree that there are definitely issues that we are trying to support the county working through with HDHO, and some of the issues that people are struggling with in finding housing and trying to get these HDHO units are outside of the parameters of the code working or not. It's kind of. Yeah, as we said, yep,
Thank you, Caitlin.
yep, thank you.
Anybody else? I can close the public hearing.
Anybody online?
Anybody online?
We're down to one online. Must be Megan.
Okay. So I'll close the public hearing. And do I call for a vote by the council planning commission before we discuss?
No, you guys discuss.
Oh, we discussed that. Okay, so it's open up for discussion, but planning commission, I'll leave the planning commission.
We'll need a motion to start discussion.
No. If I close the public hearing, that's what I just asked Chrissy. I wasn't sure if you close the public hearing and then make a motion. And then as the motion's made, then the planning commission discusses.
Yeah.
So the planning commission wants to make a motion on,
We'll make a motion, we close the public hearing.
no, the public hearing is just closed.
Oh, okay.
It's just closed. You need to-
She says it is and she is.
It is closed. I closed the public hearing. No, the motion would be to what the planning commission would send to the county council. And then we discuss it.
So, yeah, they can make a motion to forward a favorable or unfavorable recommendation, to the proposed changes. And then you could amend that motion later
Yes.
after discussion. Correct, it would probably be the most.
Like on page 6.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to adopt revisions to Article 4.7 high density housing overlay district of the Grand County Land Use Code.
We want, no, then we discuss, we don't do second yet, do we? Then,
So that we can
You have
have
to-
discussion,
Yes.
I'm willing to second that motion.
all right.
That's why I made it.
Now we can have discussion.
All right.
Oh. Who wants to start the discussion?
I can tell you, I mean, I guess we're not gonna go through it page by page.
You can if you would like to.
I think the one thing that I worry about is 4.7.3,
Definitions.
the definition.
Give us a page for that.
Yeah, I think it's on the very first
Okay.
page,
First one of the
unless I've
definitions.
really blown it. I think it is in that section where it talks about what is a local in terms of geographic area. Is that right? Down on, you may be able to find it for.
Is that A1? Local employment?
Yeah, local employment,
No, I'm talking about the local area where it is defined as Green River. Well, anyway, it's defined as a 75-mile radius. Is that, I thought that was in that section. So 4.7.3. Could you find it in?
Yeah, it's page 3.
Page 3. Oh, yes, it's such a large.
And
Oh, yeah, there it is, under question mark.
yeah, right under.
Yes, between, but yeah, so between, on page 3, between each I and K, and it has a question mark. I don't like the area being that big, so this does encourage people who live in Monticello, Green River, Landing, I think all are within that area to live, if my understanding, they would live in Moab and commute to those areas to work, to be actively employed. I think that's too big a geographical area. I don't think that's what the HDHO, I thought it was for locally actively employed people. So I questioned the range. I might suggest that anybody in Grant County, this, after all, this is a county program, and anybody and/or in the 84.532 zip code, which would include a little bit of Spanish Valley that's outside of us down in San Juan County. That commute seems reasonable to me and seems reasonable that somebody who was actively employed there might be beneficial to our local community. So I would suggest that change. I'm open for discussion.
Just really quickly, so this was workshopped at the few meetings that we had with the task force, and this was discussed at length. I think the original language, just so you guys know, was Grand County or 84532. A 75-mile radius came from our local purchasing policy, and that was something that was discussed at length, and that was something that was recommended by at that meeting, was that 75-mile. Of course, the planning commission can make their own recommendation. I just wanted you guys to know where that.
Yeah. I'd still stand by that
Mhm.
recommendation, and I think it's consistent with what the HDHO was designed to do. Actually, originally, it wouldn't have included the 84532 zip code district.
I would like to offer a little counterexample with that. Sorry, Bob. The company I work for right now, we have 5 employees every day drive from Blanding. And, you know, meeting a need that Moab can't make for employment. And it's like, to me, I'm seeing it's like, how, if you're sitting in Blanding, hey, I wanna, you know, I actually wanna move to Moab, to work there all the time. I have to commute 2 hours a day. We actually discussed this at one of our employee meetings. You know, how can they step into there? I think it's ideas that, you know, some people get jobs from, I mean, I think we have a lot of jobs that are fed in from Monticello and Blanding, and it'd offer a step in to the area. That would be my only counter argument to that. I mean, not my only one. I just am concerned that it's like, well, Green River's in Emery County. Or is it Emery, or Carbon County? What, that county? Emery, right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people are commuting from there and they're like, well, I can get a cheap place in Green River, but I'd actually like to stop commuting and get into Moab. Like, they have a history of, you know, working here. That's where I'm like, I can kind of see like, I mean, it's not gonna be like the invasion of Monticello. I don't think it's gonna happen, but, that would be my. I felt like that one was like pretty popular at the workshop on that, but. I mean, I don't know. That's my,
I think it's a reasonable argument. That doesn't mean I agree, no.
yeah,
No, it actually is a fairly reasonable argument that somebody who chooses to work here and live. But so I was talking about, well, let's just see about it. I gotta think about this. So that would be a person who was actively employed here and commuting from there. I'm talking about a person who says, I'm actively employed in Monticello.
Yeah.
And I commute to Moab.
right.
So that's a kind of different issue, so I think I would stick with what I said.
It's OB, the question,
Great
the
point.
one, yeah, the one between I and K is the question mark. correct?
Yes,
And the local area as defined as the 75-mile radius.
Yeah.
Is the one you're objecting to, and that's
Yeah.
kind of tied to K. Which says a local business is operating in and serving the local area. That would include Monticello and Green River and some of the others, right? Because
Well-
of K.
Mhm.
Look,
Yeah, it's.
in Grand County, the zip code and then the or would be gone is what Obie's talking about.
Yeah, that's right. But I think what Aaron's talking about is somebody that's serving that's working for a local business in 84532, for example.
yeah,
But they're forced to commute from Green River today because they can't afford to live here.
That wouldn't be,
Or Grand.
that would be a problem for them in this situation.
Because they could qualify as
losing.
active.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're already
employed. Okay, yeah,
working, yeah.
yeah, that's a good point.
So they could get it without.
What you're concerned is somebody just buys it, like, the boss hog of Monticello buys up everything. And then Is that kind of,
Or that they buy up something that could be used for somebody who lives here and works here.
you're concerned about the flow of traffic going out instead of coming in?
Yeah.
I see.
Can I speak on that? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Please
Okay,
proceed.
sorry. So, I commuted for 5 years before I was able to move here from Monticello, and I was able to move here through the HASU program. On the flip side of that too, while living here, I took a job in Monticello because I wanted to move back to San Juan County. But the truth is, even with this HDHO program, the wages in Monticello and Blanding are not livable wages for living in Moab. So I don't think that you're going to see that kind of traffic for having people occupying HDHO units here and traveling south for jobs, because there's a reason so many people commute from Blanding and Monticello for jobs down here. The wages are far superior than anything in San Juan County. We actually have people at City Market who commute from Anna. So I totally see Obi's point, but I think because of the difference in the economy, you're not necessarily going to have that issue.
Yeah, and then that gets in the thing, well, we're not having that issue today. That's all the unforeseen things. I mean, Obi, you kind of changed my mind. I mean, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good point. You're already covered. But so what is, I mean, what are some counter suggestions on?
I mean, my language would be Grand County and the 84532 zip code district. That would get us down a little bit into San Juan County in the Spanish Valley area and the county itself.
So then Obi, in that case, I guess. Mary, you're right, the HDHO thing is kind of, there's a lot to this. But in Obi's case, as a, for instance, let's say that somebody was employed by a local business, living in Blanding, doing the commute every day. They've been doing that for 2 years.
They're perfectly welcome because they are an actively employed household here.
How do you feel about Megan's concern? Like, let's say you did get an awesome job. Now, do we kick you out? Now you're not qualified?
You mean
But-
an awesome job in Monticello?
Yeah. Let's say, you get 200K job down there and you're like, I still want to live in Moab. Are they, I mean, we're letting retired people, I mean, you still kind of live here, right? I mean, that's a thing to her counter argument.
We deal with retirees in here, right? We
So as
don't-
long as you retire but don't take the job, you'd be okay.
But, and we also deal with. We deal with the local employment as well, and my understanding is with the way it's written in here is. If they're no longer locally employed, they're no longer eligible for HDHO. But didn't we put a clause in there not forcing people to sell?
Yeah, if you're if you're deemed eligible,
Right.
you, let's say you can move up to Salt Lake, you could rent out your place still.
Yeah.
But as long as the occupant, I mean, it's a good sticking point. Like, what do we
Yeah.
consider workforce and what do you consider resident?
Well, there's a difference between residence and ownership,
Yeah.
right? And that was one of the things I wanted to talk about too. When my time.
Your time's now.
And was there, but Obi was on a roll, was there more than there? Mary, do you think we could just finish up with one
sure.
person at a time?
That's-
It might be more
I
efficient.
think I'd like to go to you and I might come back.
This is open discussion with planning commission, so you guys can discuss.
I had 8 things in here and I think most of them are pretty simple, Chrissy. But the first one is just, I wanted some clarification from you. So in definitions E on page 9 of 20, we talk about the 80%. Yeah. When you're there, let me know.
That's not a change part.
No, that's not changed,
Uh-huh.
but that relates to something else that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
We talked about 80% of lots or units developed on the property restricted for primary residential housing employed or occupied by actively employed households. And then in J, we talk about master plan recorded and so on. I'm assuming, just for my knowledge, that if a lot is deed restricted, it's gonna be, the master plan is gonna, will the master plan show the lots or the houses that are actually the 80% that are deed
So-
restricted?
Those, yeah, and that's what when I was speaking to this deed restriction, those are recorded on the final plat already. And
Okay,
those encumbrances are on there, all of those, all of those are already marked and they're already recorded, those have
Right.
already exist in every final plat that was recorded.
Okay.
And that was, done as part of the master plan and then upon recordation of final plat, so those are already done.
okay, good, answered that question, so that's 1 and 2 that are gone. And the reason I wanted to clarify that is because the ownership and the residency thing comes up time and time again, and I wanted to just, for my understanding, know how the ones that are restricted and the ones that are not are segregated.
Yeah, so that's done with a deed restriction on the final recorded plat. And then when they go to purchase it, it shows up as a deed restriction, and then some of
restrictions.
them do have no deed restrictions, and those can be purchased and
Yeah.
lived in and done, well, they can't be rented, because of, rented.
Yeah.
Short-term rented, but yeah,
Yeah.
so those are all,
Is the actual deed restriction written on the plat or is it? It is, that's great. Yeah, that's good.
that's why I was banging my head against the wall, how I was gonna fix that.
Yeah, because those are recorded when you record. the
Yeah,
plat,
how I was
period.
gonna fix that
Yes.
retroactively, that's why I was stayed up all night trying to rewrite things. 5 different times.
The next one I got maybe is a little bit of a net, but in 4.7.6,
Mhm.
A and B, which is on page 10 of 20, if it printed out the same for you,
Mhm.
the word perpetuity is used.
4.7.6, which one, B?
General, the last word in that is
Oh.
perpetuity.
Yeah.
And the same in B, I think, yeah, we do use it in B as well.
Mhm.
I guess my question is, typically is that word used for these things because nothing lasts forever?
Well, so when speaking to something that's being recorded, we talk about, like, we're talking about like an easement or a right of way. In perpetuity is part of the legal language associated with those things.
And so for an easement, it would be there until it's vacated. So there's a process to get rid of an easement.
Yeah,
Well,
and there
let's
would be a
say-
process to get rid of a deed restrictions.
And yeah, so like, let's say that a condo development 50 years from now, somebody wants to tear it down, it's in disrepair, nobody's living there anymore. How would they actually overcome the perpetuity?
So the same way you would do it for like, an ADU that's deed restricted on a property, if that gets torn down, you go, yes, I believe it's by resolution in front of the commission, you have that
Okay.
removed from the deed.
Okay.
In a case like this, it would. Because this is associated with development agreement and a master plan, if it was torn down, you would essentially go back to the underlying zoning, which is 1-to-1 or whatever it is at that time. Because all of this is associated with the master plan and the ordinance that was,
Right?
entered into at that point.
And it would be that specific lot.
It wouldn't be to the lot, I think it would be,
It'd be the
well,
whole
if you you'd have to tear down the entire thing, and then it would go back to
Yeah, and then
underlying
you
zoning, similar to like. the-
Everything in the plat, the master
Yes.
plan would be affected. I think that
Yes.
would be.
Yeah.
Chris,
And
the
I-
reason I bring that up is because I was actually raised in Detroit.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of things that people thought would never go away have gone away.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'd be easier to deal with these things up front, but if there's a way to deal with it after the fact.
No, that is helpful, I appreciate that comment. I did actually consider on these, the deed restriction, one of the things that we considered to, that me and myself considered to make it lendable when we were talking to each other about it, was, was, putting a end date, but that wasn't something that was brought forth
That's
from the commission, and then, the master plan because it is in perpetuity, I thought better of that, but it is something we could consider maybe at the next time this comes back to us is, having this deed restriction end at some point in the future, 50 years, I don't know,
Yeah, maybe. in
30 years, I don't.
Yeah, because perpetuity is something that has, I mean, I've even seen that. So it's. something-
Yeah, I mean, it's in like the CUP language.
It's not hard.
Yeah, no, yeah, there's ways to.
It's a simple process.
Another one was just what Ronnie was talking about with the primary lien holder being. The rights of the primary lien holder being. Maybe better defined. right?
Yeah, and I can get behind that and work through this agreement, this, I mean, this is a contract language, like we can fix all of that.
But even in here, could we do some kind of a phrase about protecting the primary lien holder?
I'm starting to think about maybe separating enforcement for development versus enforcement for deed restriction, and that might actually be the easiest way to deal with it, and I don't know why I didn't think about it before. Like we could have separate in the enforcement section of the land use code, have enforcement for the deed restriction versus enforcement for development, and just have them, I versus I, 1 versus 2 or something. I don't love that, but I could definitely work on that, and I think that would address some of the livability issues that.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned about passing a recommendation to something that may need, like, this is complicated, right? I mean, it's complicated to me, maybe not to you, but I mean, you're already inventing new things, right? Like, because it's like, the brain has to figure things out. I'm just like wondering, can we pass a motion that's like, oh,
With the
Chrissy
recommendation
promises,
to
yeah.
separate, enforcement.
I mean, is that
I mean, I
something?
don't think that that's complicated. If you guys find that too complicated. That's, up to you, but to me, if you said, if we separate enforcement for deed restriction versus, development. To me, that's pretty clear.
Or even the bigger one was just what we talked about, protection of the primary lien holder.
Yeah.
And I think would be, in my mind, Aaron, it would be okay to approve this to move forward. With the condition that Chrissy and legal work on wording added to this for protection of the primary lien holder to address the lending issues.
And I think that that's completely appropriate. I also think that that's not changing, anything that you guys don't bless. And, we also keep in mind that this is scheduled for you guys have another commission meeting before this is scheduled to go on a county commission meeting, so
we
we can.
table.
You could table it, because the agenda deadline was today. I couldn't get this on an agenda today anyway, so it's scheduled to be on the June.
How do you feel
Can I
about
make a
that?
motion?
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna make a motion to table until next,
Well, let's keep going through the issues.
Yeah, now we should, yeah.
jump in the gun.
No, that's,
I really like.
it's a good option. It's a good option. And already it's like passing this motion is like,
Mm.
cause I think we're all are we kind of all in agreement of that
Yes.
thing about, well, lendability was the easy one, right? Let's get them, well, no, like, we all agree that we want them
Yeah,
to be
we wanna
lended,
get it fixed.
right? So it's like, whatever language that helps with that process, that's not the controversial part.
It's gonna be
We'd
something
actually like this to work.
Yeah, and on the local housing thing, Bob, I mean, you sold me over, I mean, the only thing I don't really like about it is somebody got a better job, they bettered themselves, and then they had to move to Monticello, they lose their housing.
Okay, Jerry, you can keep going.
So,
Because he's got a list.
I think,
Sees all tabs.
this one, is my question for is already answered. So if we go to page 14 of 20. And it's item section 2, qualified household. A2II.
oh, big one.
It's the one that, it's the draft that you
Yeah,
put in.
HOA.
And this, so with this one, I thought I was clear on this, and now after some conversation, I'm not so sure anymore.
Okay.
So my question is, we're talking about kind of two different things here. We're talking about ownership and we're talking about occupancy or residency. Occupancy, I think, is the word that we've used. In this one, it looks to me like we're saying ownership has to be at least 50%. But occupancy still needs to meet the requirements defined in the
Yeah.
HDA.
So all 80% of them would still have to be occupied by
Right.
actively employed households.
Yeah,
This is just, and if the HOA restricts 50% to being owner occupied, they're occupied by the person who owns them, then we could open up the remaining to be purchased. Purchased by someone out of town and then rented to someone else. So that's just, and the 50% comes from, what's required for condominium, financing. I don't,
so it's a lendability thing.
yeah, so that is already language that is already something that they have to abide by. That's already something that exists. So 50% of these have to be owner occupied. But their definition of owner occupied is different than Grant County's. But with that, that's where that 50% came from. And it is just, like I said, it's just a compromise because the alternative from certain commission members was just opening it up completely. So this was like sort of opening it up, maybe opening it up a little bit, but not completely. And that's up to you, Benson. So that would be. So the 80%, 50% have to be of any of them. Of the 100%, 50% of them have to be owner occupied. So if there's 15% of that 20 is owner occupied, that would still count.
But currently it's,
Because they would still be locals.
and
So-
currently it's 80%.
Yes.
And would this encourage a developer, encourage a developer to have an HOA if they're gonna develop, because they can get this little extra bonus maybe?
Yeah, and most of them already do. Well, yeah, most of them already do.
Have it
Already,
tried.
are HOAs?
Isn't it required?
Because there's some of them, like,
Mhm.
there's smaller ones that just are, 3 or 4 houses, and those ones wouldn't expire it.
So we're gonna talk about this discussion point,
I think this is a good time to talk about this, and I'm still a little bit confused about this thing, so. Let's talk about only the 80% that has to be local, meet the HDHO requirements. Let's say that the 20% is sold, they're gone away, they're doing whatever they're doing, they don't meet the requirements of this. So now you've got 80%. So that means that 5/8 would fall under the 50%. Right, if the 20% is gone, they don't meet the requirements. 50% have to be permanent owner occupied. They're now exempt, what we've done is,
Open
that's,
it up for another 20%.
Yeah.
Opening it up.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, you're
Yeah.
opening it up a little bit, not completely.
did we open up 20% or did we open up 50%?
right, I see what you're saying here.
That's where I'm confused.
Well, it sort of depends on what's happening with that 20%.
Yeah,
So, and we can't speak to what's happening with that 20%. So if that 20%, if, you know, half of those are owner occupied locals, then that would be included in this 50%.
Gosh.
yeah.
How does that, where does that record come from?
Where does it?
Yeah.
It would be part of their HOA agreement,
This
so
is
they
what the
would be,
developer-
they would be policing themselves on this.
And so
I mean,
then,
it's complicated and we don't have,
Well-
this was just like I didn't know what to do. I just was trying to come up with
I'm
something.
still just not clear on it. So then. When the property, when the plat is created. The 80% are already deed restricted.
Mhm.
And so what happens to the deed restriction?
What do you mean? What happens to that?
Well, now 50% of them have to be owner occupied, so let's say that means
Oh,
five.
the deed restriction, this wouldn't change the deed restriction. Like I said, so
So
the
then-
reason that we need the HOA component is because the HOA would police this, not the county.
I see.
So, Chrissy, in adding II,
Mhm.
where are you removing the original? Is the original the owner, the managers of HBO?
This is just an exception. This is in the exception section. So this is an exception to, ownership. There's an ownership exception for HDHO units that have an HOA. That require within that within the HOA, 50% of their units to be owner occupied. That they're not, you know, that the owner, and they would, of those 50%, they still have to all be, actively employed households. As defined by the land use code.
Okay, so this newer section, right there, under number 2. The following types of ownership shall be exempt from the HTO qualified requirements. And the new in red and the new in yellow. But we would have, but what we're taking out is the stuff that you've crossed out at the bottom down here, right? So it currently reads, the owners and managers of an HDHO multifamily apartment development in which units are rented and not sold individually are exempt from being a qualified household development. They're removing that and putting these.
So that was language I wrote, that was never in here. That was green language that I,
That makes, because
yeah, no, don't pay attention to that. It was
Alright.
it never
Okay.
existed.
Never
It
did.
was something
Okay.
that I was
okay,
working on drafting
okay.
and then hated.
I almost don't like it being on the responsibility of an HOA for enforcement.
You don't like an HOA to enforce to police their own rules?
Yeah,
They
Well,
have
they
to,
have to.
that's,
I mean, what, like
that's a state law,
Southeast, the housing authorities.
not
manage-
HOA, not HOA.
Not
HOA is a
HOA,
homeowners
yeah.
association, and that is totally, every homeowner, everybody that buys into a development has an HOA. The HOA president, vice president, chair are the owners of that HOA.
Mm,
And you pay money into it, it's not, it doesn't come to the county.
So, and these are in place on anything that has like, shared spaces.
Right.
So like, you know, parking lot.
No, I get it. I
spaces,
just am like,
Yeah.
okay,
So they.
that's the way it's
that
done. It's done.
themselves, so that the county HASU wouldn't have to, I mean, we still have to do, you know, making sure that these guys are all qualified, actively employed
Right.
households, but they would just be in charge of making sure.
Yeah.
These 50%.
Jerry, keep going.
So,
Let me try, Jerry.
okay,
I'm trying to figure this out myself. It is a tough one.
I don't.
So in section 2, qualified household, the very first thing says qualified household. The ownership shall use and occupy the lots shall be limited to, the ownership shall be limited to actively employed households. So that, I guess, normally 80% of the folks in this homeowners association would have to be actively employed households.
No.
And I get, and so that'd be plenty of ownership. But here, if we can do this, I guess, here, they're going to allow 30% of those folks could not be actively employed households in terms of they'd be actively employed. How does this work?
They would be 30% actively, they would all be actively employed households. It would just be The
They wouldn't own
They
it,
wouldn't,
they
the
wouldn't own it.
owner would have to be local. The
Got it.
owner could
Yeah.
be,
Okay.
but they would still have to rent it to someone local. That part doesn't change. All this does was just
So-
open up ownership a little bit instead of.
So if I understand correctly, then 50% of the people could be owners who were not local. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
that's the difference.
So,
It's just the owner would still be actively employed. Of the 80%, everyone would still be actively employed.
Except for the 20% that
ownership-
are.
Yeah, so the
Just
20% that aren't.
a little bit.
And then 50% would be, we would open it up 50%.
And I don't know why Caitlin left when she had the great good graph that probably showed that.
yeah.
Yeah, she had the Venn diagram that I was actually talking about.
Jerry get through his and then I'll.
So I guess here's the last thing that's,
Oh,
I'm trying to understand here is it does say here that HOA documents maintain at least 50% of the total number of the units in the development be permanent owner occupied is exempt from being a qualified household.
that's interesting.
Yes, because qualified household is defined by being a local.
Right.
So
So now
that's what they're-
50% would be exempt from that. The occupancy shall remain restricted to qualified households. However, the remaining units do not require ownership by an actively employed household. Well, what the HDHO is requiring 50% owner occupancy. And now we're saying occupancy shall remain restricted to qualified households. I mean, the two don't necessarily work.
What it's speaking to ownership only.
You can own it in Salt Lake, but somebody who's living in it has to be.
Yeah, the
Yes.
person living in it, the occupant.
It's just talking specifically to ownership.
Yeah, but it says in here that 50% shall be owner occupied.
Yes.
So if you're owner occupied, you're not
You have
gonna
to
live
be-
in Salt Lake
Yeah,
City.
you have to be an actively,
That's-
an actively
And if
employed
you're-
household local.
And if you're owner occupied. With a 50% requirement, you don't need to be a qualified household. Is that correct? The deed is still restricted, but you don't need to be a qualified household.
You would still be a qualified household because you would be actively employed, you would be local, so it would still qualify.
Disqualified is
It's-
different.
But it says,
Owner and.
but it says there, it says here they're exempt from being a qualified household.
50%.
Of the
Right,
owner.
so if you're one of the 50%,
I get what you're saying.
you can buy.
I think I
one of
need to work on this language.
I think,
and
yeah,
make it more
because
clear.
I think,
these- I get what you're saying, I'm just trying to understand if we
Make
just.
that more understand.
Yeah, so I think what I need to do is break it up,
Kid.
so that there's, so that I put a sentence and an and. So that that's, and then below it, so that instead of, because it reads like an or, and these are all ands. So I need to, work on it. I just,
I understand. I think I understand what you're doing, but I,
I'm just.
Yeah, I think everyone understands the intent, I just think.
Sure, I do.
Oh.
And that's why I wanted to raise this, and I think you just caught what I was saying,
Yes.
Wendy, and that is that 50% have to be owner occupied. Let's say that, well, so in that case, what it says here is if you're at the limit, you've got a deed restricted property. I can go in there and I can buy one and I can own or occupy it, and I'm exempt from being a qualified household if I'm in that 30% band. In order to meet the 50% requirements of the HOA. I'm exempt basically from being a qualified household. I mean, that's what it says here. So you're exempt from being, if you're in that narrow band, you're exempt from being a qualified household.
needs to be more wordsmithed.
Yes, I see what you're saying, but that's not what.
What are you trying
Yeah.
to do here is my question.
trying to have everybody, everybody who's in that 80 has to be actively employed. But half of that doesn't have to be owned by an actively employed
That's
household.
not, that's,
Yeah,
this says there's.
But it's not only the 80%. Technically, the 20 could qualify
Right.
in this
Yes.
specific situation. If they do, and they would be counted towards that 50%.
That's what this chart did.
And
100.
I,
right.
I just don't. I don't.
So when these are initially sold, would certain ones be restricted to owner occupancy only? Is that the way they would be HOA
No.
rules with this?
It would be like the way that generally the way the law would speak to this is first come, first served. So if, you know, if there's 100 units and the first 20
Right.
are all
Non-deed restricted.
not being restricted, but those people all live and work in Moab and they're the first 20 and they all live and work here, that would count for the first 20%.
Okay.
And then there would be 30% of the 80 left that would have to be owned and lived in by a local. If only 5 of those 20, if we're speaking to 100 houses, if 5 of those 20 were living in them, they were local, then it would still be 45 that have to be lived in and occupied by locals.
Chrissy, I think maybe just it'd make more sense that you spend some more time on that, like you're talking.
I think
Okay.
everyone has told me that. Sorry.
I think you did a great job.
Yeah.
And also, it was seriously, like, it was a compromise because I was told to open it up completely and
Try.
Yeah,
it
Make
hurt
everybody-
my heart.
Okay, Jared.
All right, I had a couple more.
This is good.
I think it's good.
it's funny how,
Yeah, sorry to keep dragging on. We're getting close.
It's a technical guy, Jared.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's.
No, that's good.
maybe you could rewrite.
Yeah, maybe we should. Let's have a contest.
That's enough for
The next one was, chain F of page 16 to 20, section 3, letter F. Change in eligibility. Once an owner is approved as a qualified household, a change in the owner's eligibility status shall not constitute a violation hereunder for the period of time the owner continues to own the HDHO lot or unit, as long as they continue to qualify as a qualified household.
As long as the occupants.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, I think that was,
So this was brought to us during the workshop, and what they said is we shouldn't restrict people from, you know, bettering themselves. So if someone, let's
Right.
say, you know, someone buys one, they're living and working here, and then they get an opportunity somewhere else and they move away.
Yeah.
As long as they're renting it to an
I understand.
occupant, that was what that language was for.
yeah, gotcha, okay, that cleared that up, thank you.
And so, yeah, if they sell it, obviously the person that they sell it to would have to qualify, but
Yeah.
just, you know, we didn't wanna prevent someone from purchasing something if, you know, let's say they want to move to somewhere else
That
and they
might
get a
be
better
s-
job.
That could be subject back to that HOA issue though, right? Because if that
Yeah, but
ownership
that would be
thing
the
drops,
HOA's job to.
yeah, that's up to the HOA to.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And, second from the last here.
last page.
Is letter F at the bottom of 4, on
Mhm.
page 17 to 20. HDHO unit transfers upon the owner dying or if the last surviving co-owner dies. They have to notify HASU within 90 days. HASU consents to transfer the HDHO unit to one or more of the heirs. But I'm assuming that the residency requirements remain. What we're talking about is an ownership change, not a residency change.
Right, so we just, what we're trying to prevent is, let's say someone retires and they buy one of these. And then they're leaving it to their
Right,
son or daughter, granddaughter, somebody,
yeah,
we don't want that to be a headache that someone has to deal with, or they suddenly are forced to sell their house in 90 days, that was
Yeah.
just, you know. So this was one of an answer to a problem that probably shouldn't exist. Someone retires, they purchase a house, and then it gets transferred to an heir, as long as the occupancy, you know, remains the same. This person didn't purchase it. It will still have to be sold to, you know, in theory, as it stands, an actively employed household, the occupant would remain the same. This was just, if we didn't change the ownership, this would just, the ownership language we spoke about earlier. This is just sort of an answer to,
yeah,
you know.
technically the ownership changes.
Yeah, the ownership is changing, but it's not being sold. And one of the reasons that this program is what it is that it's the sell that creates the qualification, because it was transferred because of a death. It just seemed that this is just something that needed to be
But do
better.
I guess my question is, do they still have to be a qualified household?
To own it because someone died, like if someone no, that's what this is for, is letting someone know that if like grandma's buying one of these, it would be, and she only has 5 years, 6 years to live.
Right,
We didn't want her to not purchase one because then her heir would have to sell it.
Yeah.
Immediately and deal with the
Right.
funeral and deal with all of these things. So having it be able to be transferred to someone seemed like a compassionate answer.
It's
so
almost like,
yeah, that kind of was my question. Maybe that's where you're going to. It's on the residency side of this. Is, so now grandma's grandson inherits this, and they live in Moab. Or let's say they don't live in Moab, they are no longer qualified household.
They would have to rent it to someone that's qualified.
They would have to rent it to a qualified person.
But they wouldn't have to live in it or
Right.
work here to keep owning it
Right.
because it was transferred to them from,
Yeah,
you know. Oh, well,
So they could decide to just live in it.
they could decide to live in it.
And
or
they
could-
wouldn't, and
and
it wouldn't have to be an actively employed house, yeah.
It's
But if
almost
they
like-
sell it,
And that changes all
That's
the
compassionate.
percentages, so like,
Compassion, that's
are
exactly.
those percentages like the 50%, 80%, 20%, those are all just to start everything off, and then all.
that's
these things
at the
change over
development
time.
stage, yeah.
How do you track it? If you, people like.
So, to go back to the HOA language.
It goes back to the HOA.
Yeah,
To-
or if it's the 80%, it would still be actively employed. If it's a deed restriction property, it would still be actively employed. They would have to, the person occupying it would always have to be.
okay. See, I don't know if that's really clear. I'd suggest that we clarify that and just by saying the actively employed requirements must be maintained, something like that. That is the intent, right?
Like,
except for the inheritor. With that, until he sells it or rents it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think yeah,
I think this, yeah, I mean, it would still be. Occupancy would always be subject to active employment, always, it's always, so this isn't like this is just talking about. The sale of the property and how you notify, this is, you know.
let me ask you
yeah.
again, Chrissy, because I thought what I was asking you is, I'm the son of the person who died,
Mhm,
and I say, I've got the property, I'm gonna live in it.
mhm.
Are you gonna make me be a worker? Are you gonna let me I can just stay there
You could stay there,
until
presumably you would be living here at that
Yeah.
point and become, you know, member.
right, but wouldn't have to be active.
You wouldn't have to qualify before you could move into it.
This is.
And then what happens is, if I decide I'm gonna sell it,
Then you have to
then you
sell.
say, okay, to an actively employed household. And then going back to earlier stuff, in one of these big, Murphy Flats,
Mhm.
if I buy one of the units that says you've got to be actively employed. It's that unit that has to stay with an actively employed person versus somebody who buys one of the units that doesn't require you to be actively employed, one of the 20%. So it goes with the unit.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
always, and that's recorded on the master plan, on the final plat.
And I think that was
Deeds.
part of Laura's question. That's how they'll
Yeah,
follow it.
that follows the land, so those in perpetuity, to use the language again, kill it. That will exist until it's removed via resolution.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And
So
that's,
that stuff isn't changing.
no, none of that will change, and that was,
Oh.
yeah, so like if something has the master plan and then there's phases, and all of those phases have to be 80 and 20.
Okay.
80 and 20, 80 and
Okay.
20. And the purpose of the 20 was to allow the developer to make the money that, presumably they will be making from developing.
Right.
So what you're saying here is the heir may occupy the HDHO unit.
I can clarify that if you think,
I think
Like,
that
that's
would,
not
yeah,
clear.
I think that'd be good, because there are requirements in here about who is a qualified household, and an heir would be a qualified household by default, if in fact they live there.
This whole section is actually just specific about sale of the units,
Okay,
but what you just said made sense.
yeah, an heir would become a qualified
Yes.
household,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, cause what happens if they work down and take a job in Monticello? Now they're outside the zip code. You know?
Let's say they were living in Grand Junction, grandma died, they got the unit, they decided to move here.
Yeah.
They're
And they're
not
retired.
qualified. Yeah,
And they can live there forever, because they're retired, till they die.
That's a question.
Okay,
So what are we at on that automatic qualification
yeah,
for heirs?
yeah, I think so, I think was the intent of that, wasn't it?
I don't
And
think that is the.
so then if they rent, it's still, they would have to find a qualified household to rent. But if they were occupying it, they would become a qualified household.
Yeah.
And I think that would be fair. Sounds like we have to.
Yeah, and yes, it's a humanitarian thing to do, so it's kind of an exception for just that person.
Yeah.
And for citizens.
Yeah.
The last thing I had was in this last part, in the deed restrictions. And under foreclosure, it says within 60 days after receipt of any notice described therein, this is on page 19 and 20s in your
Oh.
deed restriction.
Oh, in the
Yeah.
part A? Okay,
The county may proceed to make any payment required to avoid foreclosure. The question I've got there is just why the heck would we do that?
that's why it's highlighted, I said we would probably not. But one of the things that, I was questioning with lendability was if this language remained, would that alleviate heartburn from the lender? If the county's bank was behind this,
But I think that just brings up a complex situation where,
right, we could
Yeah.
probably remove it, and that's why it's highlighted, it does, I don't know if you guys can see the comment that says probably remove
Yeah.
this. But I wanted to let the commission decide if that was something that they wanted to do, because there was language in here about the county owning that.
Now we can have bailouts, county bailouts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
just
it was just it was sort of, I put it in there just in case, and it was mostly, I didn't know if that would help with lendability or not.
I guess my thought is, why would we use county funds to pay somebody's mortgage even though we're gonna put a lien on it?
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think we would.
It's
I
just-
don't, it was
Yeah,
it was
just-
only to answer to lendability questions if that language is helpful. Just giving the county the option might have been something that helped, I don't know.
That wasn't brought up by our lender, so.
Yeah,
Guess
so
it's-
probably not even a thing that I needed to worry about.
So is that it, Jared?
That was the end.
Aaron, did you have something you wanted to talk?
Yeah, I think that I'd like to just dive into on the discussion on the 50-50 split ownership. The way I see it is, we kind of have a divided commission on this. And I think we need to tip our hats to both sides, kind of come up with a ratio that I think that would try to be acceptable. to all, cause you know, we have some, you know, like Ben, he's saying like the intent was to this, but we also have a project that was always subject to change. So, you know, I guess we have to decide, is 50-50 enough? And, you know, we talk about change of character of neighborhoods. We, when I see this, I have to decide, you know, what's acceptable to me. I think, you know, a 50-50 is you know, I guess we have to decide on a position between Bill and Trish, right? Like that was kind of like the contention on that. I mean, yeah, I mean, Bill wouldn't take everything off. Probably there's people that, I don't know what exactly, you'd probably like see none of them off. What is something that we can give to the commission?
Are we talking about the
Section 2.
HOA thing again?
Yeah, the
No.
50, yeah.
And imagine that the language is perfect.
Yeah. So that number 50-50, I would just kind of like, you know, I guess I'll stake a 75-25 on that as a reasonable,
In section 2.
I mean, do we split it between 4-3, you know, like four thirds? What do you guys think?
I just would like to clarify, Aaron, we're talking about section 2.
Yes, this right here. Yeah, yeah.
Aye, got it.
I guess I'm
So the
still
thing
not,
that- yeah.
I'm still not clear exactly what the,
So of that 80%,
right, I get
okay,
that.
are you cool with 50% of it being outside, potentially outside ownership, or you like, you
Well,
want
And
25%
we're talking
outside?
ownership, not residency, not occupancy, right?
Occupancy, we're not touching, it's the ownership part,
Right, it's still,
And it's currently 80%.
but no, it's currently 100% of the 80%. So we're talking about rolling that 100%
Percent
back,
only 50.
yeah, how do you guys feel on that?
Then when you're saying, can I ask a question? So then when you're saying 50, you're really saying of the entire project, you're really saying 70%.
Right, exactly, 70%,
Am I saying that right?
yes.
I know, it's so, maybe I'm not.
Well,
Because 20% have already been opened up,
It sort of depends on what their,
or sorry, 60%,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
that's
I
60,
started
yeah.
Could we do
early.
like a thought experiment? Like, okay, let's say there's 100 units.
Yep,
There's
Let's
100
always stick with 100.
So right now, 100% of the units
No.
has,
80
right now, 80 units
has to be,
owner owned or owner
Owned
occupied.
yeah,
Owner and occupied.
yeah,
no, they just have to be locally owned.
Okay,
80% have to qualify to own as a. Active employed household. In order to purchase. Of those 80 units, you have to be an actively employed household.
okay,
So 80 of the 100 units.
okay, so that's how it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to figure out is there's 100 units and 50 of those units.
no, 80
Well,
of those,
but-
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
is it 50 of those units are still gonna be owner occupied or locally owned and occupied?
With the language that I was proposing.
This is the
yeah.
compromise.
Yeah,
that we're
that was
looking at.
50 of those, of the 100 would be,
The
Subject,
same as the 80, okay. And then the other 50%, so the other 50, there's 30% of that 50. Would be,
could be owned by, let's say, an
Someone.
outside investor, as long as the person residing in it was local.
okay,
and then 20 of them are just whatever they are.
Always, 20 is always.
so that
Yeah.
is the compromise that we're trying to talk about.
Now,
That's right.
part of my consideration with this is you know, there's a little concern that like some of these haven't sold. Now, I feel like we're addressing that issue with changing the lendability. Like developers having a hard time selling some of these, bam, we took care of it. Now we're getting into like a little bit more, like this would be possibly a subsidy. And I think about the other community members who gave up their density in exchange for a community looking like a certain way. Like we want local ownership. So I think about that as respecting other people's property rights in that argument. So, but we also have a reality, like like there is a movement to strip some of that into non-qualified ownership. So
Resident owner.
I'm just like, basically what I'm getting at is like, what, like, I'm kind of framing the argument for us. Where do you guys fall on that?
If I make a comment, it's not a part of the argument. I just think it would be really good if people have gone to specifically, I think Murphy Flats. And just look at it and go, you know, how do you feel about as it conforms to the community? But really to me, the Tierra del Sol, am I saying that correctly? I really think people should visit that.
Desert Soul.
Desert Soul, thank you. So I know, like all these Tierra, red dirt, I don't care, whatever. Desert Soul, just because I think. I mean, that's all I'll say. I think just people
That's the
should
one
visit that.
by Buzz Bates.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
that's-
what- Yeah.
I think most of them were large lot residential zones.
Yes, they were.
They were 1 to
Or-
1. So the density on. I think that, you know, they had the option of 10, 15, 25, and 35, I believe, was the density, and that was per acre. So some, you know, some qualified for the 10, some qualified for the 15, the 25, or the 35, and you had to, you know, each of them was applied to this 1 to 1 underlying zoning with the caveats of this 80-20 ownership. So, you know, that's what, when we went through the public hearing process on all of this, when these guys applied and that's what the public went into this. These are the comments that were taken in when they made this legislative decision, was based off of 80-20. So us changing that, and I do realize this is a public hearing, and there will be another public hearing, but you know, that's I guess what is the most important thing to consider for the planning commission when they're deciding on ownership is what do we owe to those people, versus what do we owe to people who are trying to find houses? And it's a big question.
Also, there's a thing where it's like, these things, we would like to sell that, like, you know, we don't wanna see empty ones. And so, but will just the clearing up the lendability solve that problem? Or is it not? And this is where I don't think facts, like, I don't know if there is any facts. You need some kind of economist to be like, yes, if we switched it to a 50-50, the prices for each one of these units will go up $35,000. And then this is, I don't know, we're filling politics with facts, or I'm sorry, facts with politics, because I don't know. I don't think it's possible to have that.
And we need to,
information.
as a planning commission, realize we are not real estate
Exactly.
agents. We are here to adopt an ordinance, re-adopt an ordinance that went through a couple of years of process. And was approved and apparently won awards. And suddenly we're saying we need to change it because somebody didn't like it. I have a hard time with that, especially.
Or
all
if
the
it's
years
not
I've worked
functional.
with
If, like, the lendability thing is a
it.
functionality.
Ask for it. It's like a zone change. This is a zone change. You didn't have to ask for it.
Right, but on the lendability section, we're trying to make it more lendable.
I don't think we need to get into it. Lendability to me is not something we need to get into in the county. We are not bankers or real estate agents.
But if
We
that's why
are-
people are upset, right, like,
Then they-
there's, things aren't selling because of the lendability.
Well, that
That's-
impacts.
I wanna-
Then
I
the
want a
developer
functional
needs to figure it
program.
out. That's-
Yeah.
That's not our job. Our job is to make a developer have an ordinance that works. If it doesn't work for them, then they should sell it or do something with it. Our job, well, the county's job, not our job, but the whole entire county's job, including the public, are here to write an ordinance to work for helping people who live here, live in a house and not have to worry about cost. We're not the developer. We offer this to the developer. They don't have to buy it, but look at all they got in the process of getting it.
Right.
I would have a hard time living next to. I bought a house, I have a parcel of land, it's a full acre. Somebody comes in and builds a 35 unit acre per acre to next to me,
Mm-hmm.
they were given that opportunity by the county. And we need to recognize that as that's not the only person out there. There are a whole group of people out there besides them.
So are you in favor of the changing of the lendability requirements?
Nope.
No, okay, I thought we were, the only thing I would say about this is at our subcommittee meeting, everybody in that room was in favor of changing those lendability requirements. That was county commissioners from both sides. And like, this is the first time I've heard that counter argument to that, Mary, and
It's a zone change.
Yeah.
As a developer, you come in, you ask for a zone change, you offer us this big, beautiful, wonderful project, and then come in and say, guess what, I can't sell it.
But you know, Mary, to that point, we mentioned earlier, if there are things in this document that are making it difficult.
Oh, I think we
lien
should fix
holders,
the difficult.
We should
I
fix
think
them.
we need to fix the difficult part.
I think we put
you're
it
in favor of that, changing the loan.
Well,
Difficult. part,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
well, and we talked about one specifically, which.
There's I think.
It
there's a
was
good part.
protection of the primary
Yes.
lien holder, right? That's something we have addressed. That's one of the three things I noted here.
Can I ask a question about this exact thing, this HOA? Is this language because of a requirement for HOAs, isn't it? That's special about them
Yes,
or,
so condos specifically,
okay,
and I think that probably Ronnie can speak to this more articulately than I can. 50% of them, in order for financing, are required to be owner occupant. But their definition of owner occupant means that it could be a second home, is that correct? Yes, so. This language. Sort of when I imagined it, as I was drafting it, I was including the 20% that are not deed restricted. Would more than likely automatically be part of this 50%. But it doesn't have to be, I mean, that's the
so
way.
they
when I
need
drafted it, I-
50% owner occupied.
Yeah, in order for financing of the entire condo, because the entire thing has to be.
And so if it was,
In order for things to be
if
lended.
it was 80% actively employed households that have to own the house, they'd have enough people. But that would be owner occupied, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, no, I mean, so 50% of their total occupancy has to be owner occupied in order for lendability. And that includes that 20% that's not deed restricted.
So I may be missing something. So if we treated HOAs just like anybody else, that 80% of the households had to be owner occupied by an actively employed household, the HOAs wouldn't have a problem because that's more than 50%. Am I right, or is that?
Yeah,
am I
but
mis-
80% have to be occupied, they don't have to be owned.
Yes,
Well,
but.
but they don't have to be owner occupied.
Yeah.
And this language is specific to owner occupancy.
I see.
And that was one of the sort of concessions was that if these 50% of the units are occupied by someone who also owns it, it's going to have a little bit more, I don't want to say pride, but you know, when you're living in what you own as opposed to renting it, usually there's an element of care to the property that is just inherently happening because you own it, you're not renting it. Not to say that renters, but it's just part of it. When you're renting something, it sometimes isn't as, you don't take care of it as much as if
I
you.
can see the incentive there.
So that's the, one of the reasons that this language came to me was because of that, owner occupancy component. But then that kind of got lost in, so the number stayed the same, but
So
change.
you've got all the information from what we talked about tonight to make changes to the code. Okay, you know what you need, you like the,
I actually wrote 3 things that came from my long list.
Well, I mean, but you guys haven't voted on those
I know,
yet, so I know, like,
I'm just
I
saying.
do know,
Yeah.
yeah, I understand, I think the consensus on the things that.
So now the count, our planning commission can vote to send it forward with an approval or a disapproval, or as Chrissy mentioned to us earlier, we could table it because we have a meeting before the next council meeting can go forward, right? Is that what you said? So we can table this and have her bring back this information that we've talked about and clarify some stuff.
I would like that, other than we need to get a hard number on that.
Yeah, I mean,
50-50
I do
thing.
think I need some direction
Yeah.
on ownership
Yep.
from you guys. I need to know about how you generally feel about the 75 miles, because I think that was one of the contentions. And then the, I wasn't 100% sure where we landed on the heirs. I thought that the heirs, we're good with the heirs. Okay.
Then we're
The
gonna,
heirs.
I thought so.
The heirs,
The inheritance,
the inheritance.
that they become,
She said errors too.
No, the heirs.
You're okay with errors?
That's on the 4F. I think the main thing on the air was, to me, it just wasn't clear that the heir may occupy the unit even though they're not a qualified household.
I can add it to the exceptions.
So, all right, so if we can get a motion?
Well, can we just review the things that
Oh, sure,
happened?
sure, go ahead.
And then Aaron, I agree with you too, that the protection of the primary lien holder, some protection should be for Ronnie's notes. Put in there that primary lien holder is protected. Clean up the HOA issue, which is
Yeah, and where did you guys
50%.
land on that? Or do you guys, I can just remove it. This is like, this was.
If we removed it, then it would
You guys
just
can
remain
remove something
80%.
else. Yeah, you guys can just say keep it as it is and then not touch the ownership. Like that is also an option. You guys get to make this recommendation as a
commission-
body.
can the commission
they can do it.
change it?
Yep.
They can do
They
what they
can-
want. You
okay.
guys are just recommending what you
Just
guys
recommend
want. If
changes.
you don't want the HOA thing, then just don't deal with it.
It'd probably be good to get the other two members in here when we have that discussion too, if we can
Well-
delay that.
Well, we're gonna have it, no, we
I
take.
guess
To
Megan is,
discuss it.
Yeah. we'll get-
Megan's on here.
We somehow, sorry. Hi, Megan, sorry.
She's still there. Megan, do you have something you wanna say?
And there's more, Judy, on that.
Sorry.
Megan.
I just-
I'm sorry.
Apparently she
I
doesn't.
didn't realize she wasn't here the whole time. It was just.
Okay.
She was gone, but I think maybe she can do. But the 50% thing, I guess we could have a discussion and do a straw poll here to give Chrissy some direction. Or would you guys rather we wait till the others are in?
I think we need more people.
I think that's a good suggestion, but
I honestly don't, I think I'll be in the minority, but I still think we got.
be in the minority.
But anyway,
so
Chrissy can write it so that it says all of it, and then we can pick what one we can.
You can write it. Yeah.
I'll
the,
write it for you, Chrissy. And then you can.
the only thing I would say to that, Mary, is if you suggest something, it might be. You might win more in the, like, if you might get nothing
That's okay.
out of that. So,
But-
if we suggest 25, 50, 75%.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
leaving it, my main reason for leaving it the way it is. is because-
So
No,
don't
the
change it.
80.
No, leave it
The
the
80,
original,
yeah.
leave the original.
just remove the
An
HOA.
ordinance,
That's
it
what I
took a
do.
lot of time to write, and they spend a lot of time on it. And it's. The developers picked it, they chose to use it. It's not something that, like, it's not like I move into a house and suddenly I have this ordinance that I have to live up to. Somebody bought into it. And. I mean, I don't have a problem being wrong, but that's how I feel about it, and it's mainly because for years. I dealt with an ordinance, a big old book, and people just had to deal with it. This is something they chose, and zoning was not easy, changing a zone is not easy, and this is essentially a zone change.
Question, I wasn't here in the very beginning of making this, but was the intention was to get people that live here to own something.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome, but was also the intention, like, this was just like some really big experiment and we're supposed to be making changes if it didn't work?
Oh, changes happen all the time. I mean, you can make
It was a pilot.
changes.
That's why it sunsetted,
Okay.
you know.
So that's, yeah, I guess.
I think we don't have it, if people choose to make the changes, but it's definitely gonna be a minority, I mean, majority of the people.
If
that
we
want
were-
those changes, not just a few of us.
And I think your point's very well taken. Property owners next to these things pay a price for it,
Yep.
and of course, developers get a very nice bonus for it.
Get a bonus.
So we should remember all of that in this.
That being said, I could see passing this, forwarding a favorable a favorable recommendation. If we do, like, keep the 80-20 how it originally was, I'd be willing to pass that and have it off our plate instead of tabling it, unless you wanna table it,
It's up to you guys.
so.
You know,
With
With,
all of the
with,
other
with
changes.
the other changes,
Yeah.
Brenda?
The other changes and removing, ownership, the ownership component, and then just passing a favorable recommendation is what I'm hearing with the changes to,
Cleaning up.
Jerry's.
yeah. But you
Jerry,
know,
what
I
about
guess on the 50 versus 80, I would like to get the input of the other
I
people.
think it would be a good
Okay.
idea.
And that one of the reasons is, well, you know, we all talk about addressing the housing issues in this area. And I can guarantee you a 50-50 is gonna help provide more housing. It may be some rentals, it may be at a higher price than some people wanna pay, but there will be more housing available. And so I respect what you have to say a lot, Mary.
Well, that's fine.
But I think there is that component here too,
Yes.
where, you know, it will provide more housing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is free, right? It comes at a price.
And although I'd only, I mean, we built housing. And it seems to be expensive housing. I
Yeah.
do hear this argument often. Somebody could put up affordable housing in highway commercial.
Yeah,
They could do it,
yeah,
but that's not the housing people want
yeah.
to build. So I think these restrictions that might bring down the price are important, so. I don't know. It's just tough. It's not, in other words, I never think it's just a matter of building housing. That's the, you know, we got the free market and we are where we are right now.
And like, maybe someone knows more than I do, but like, how do we know the numbers of
It's a
Murphy
fraction.
flats? Like,
What's the market?
Oh, yeah.
Tomorrow?
We know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we
no.
we know like how much have sold and how much are empty and, okay.
I guess the,
I,
Well,
well,
I don't
Lauren,
know how.
my thought on your question is there is there.
What's that?
I have a spreadsheet that shows all 100%, not 80-20 ownership, sold, developer owned.
Okay.
Yeah, they exist.
There is a little
I should-
Laura, there's a little glimmer of data that indicates that. I mean, somebody's talking about the problem with the houses in Murphy Flats, for example, is getting the lending. It's
Right.
right, and so that's a little indication where if we open that up a little bit more, we probably would see more housing. But, you know, that's the issue with a non-owner occupied really is that they're gonna move the rates to whatever the market will bear. Whereas if somebody can get in as an owner, sure, you have income tax, or you have tax increases, and you're gonna have association dues to maintain the places and those kind of things, so what you're paying today isn't what you're gonna be paying in 10 years. It's never gonna be that way, but I can guarantee you a non-owner occupied unit is gonna see rent increases.
Yeah.
It just is gonna happen.
well, and you also gotta realize too, and I don't know if you ever pay attention, but every subdivision that's been built in this county in the last 20 years, none of them are built out.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
some are getting close.
but they're still vacant lots, and they've been here for a long time.
And,
So, you know, it just depends on what's for sale and what people wanna pay.
and
Um, And, you know, even all of us that have a house know that our houses have gone up in at a high rate, so it's not, we're not real estate agents. Planning commission is out.
Yeah. And I just wonder, as us, we serve as advisors to the commission, and if they have indicated they want that to be included, do we give them advice? I guess our advice from the small poll was no. So, but I don't know if we should be
I can
thinking
see a
about that.
benefit to the 50 or 60 or 70 or whatever the number is, right? I can see some benefit to moving.
Too, but, you know, I also believe that this is a zone change and they're asking to rezone it. If they use it, it'll be a reason.
So-
Just some information, there's 164 rental units coming online.
Yeah.
With the 2 developments that are being built out currently. And they're going to only be rentals,
That's
just to
pretty
keep that in
significant.
mind. I probably should have said that at the beginning and I meant to, but.
Are they property owners that live here?
Well, there's an
Like a what?
apartment complex and then the Desert Soul is 42.
So what you're saying is there's a larger supply of rentals. being put
Rentals,
into-
yeah, there's 164. These are from the like as far as the county knows, these are only going to be rented. There's an apartment complex
Is that
with
by
122 units.
Yeah.
And then Desert Soul
That's
has
good.
42. And those are only going to be rented. None of those are going to be sold. So that's just something to keep in mind, for.
So I'll move to table the motion, just to keep it forward until next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. I'd second that.
Second that.
But I think what we're also asking is Chrissy,
Yeah.
follow up on the items that we brought up.
Right, and so just for my own clarity, you do want me to work on the 50% language or not?
I think it would be good to have
Okay.
the cleared up, clarify the items that we have in here. That's my 2 cents worth, and then have the discussion with the other.
Okay.
two people.
And maybe in the geographic thing that I mentioned, you know, put both of them, the original language and then what my language,
Okay.
and then we can decide which one we like.
Do we have a second to Aaron's motion?
Yes.
Jerry.
Yeah, I second it.
Oh, and then we went to.
Oh.
That's something that delay.
I think it's a very good idea that we table it. That's my.
I feel.
You also have another motion at the beginning. That needs to be voted on. You had a motion to.
We did, we just voted to table that motion until the next meeting.
So-
Well, we didn't vote, we have Aaron actually made the motion to table and I seconded it, now we should vote on this.
And that's
Did you have something to
replacing?
say?
Not before we close this.
Do you have a motion, I mean, do you have a vote
In favor.
in favor of the?
And Megan's not online.
Yeah, sorry, I was only gone for a second. I heard almost all of your guys' stuff. But I vote to table also.
We
I feel like I've learned,
We've got a lot of.
It's still a really nice job. I think that's my opinion. I think it's a really nice blend of different opinions and it's
brains.
you're not mean to each other. And it's nice.
Wait till you see us next.
Right. It's not gonna come out icy. You're very,
I'm only the staff.
you're very, very good.
Yeah, but you've been doing that for years.
Very folksy.
One more thing.
I-
Have future discussions?
Yeah. And this is Megan's item.
Oh, you have something to talk about, Megan?
We just needed to talk about training or scheduling a training. We can do a doodle poll. I don't know where Megan is on that.
So the only reason it made it to an agenda item was because we needed to figure out who was going to contact ombudsmen to set up a training. And I wasn't sure if I was the one to do that. So I emailed Tony and it got onto the agenda. I've spoken to San Juan County, Moab City, and Green River, and all surrounding entities are extremely interested in participating in this, and they're very excited about it too. So I'm excited to make some networking connections and maybe do some work together. But do you want me to contact ombudsmen and try to set up dates, or who needs to orchestrate that aspect of it?
So I can do that, or you and I can work together on that.
Okay.
I think that but the most important thing right now would probably be to get like a date range that that people are in town, that it would be helpful.
Okay.
So I can call,
Do
I
you-
can work with you on that, or we can discuss it really quickly.
Do you want to
Okay,
do it?
I think everyone's probably tired. I think we can work on it and just send out I like the idea of a Google poll. I think that, I know we've all got a lot of stuff going on this summer, so.
So probably late June, early July, not the holiday weekend would probably be, I'll send out a doodle poll and then we can see when we have the most availability. And then, we'll contact the ombudsman and see which in those date ranges what works.
Okay, I just wanted to be able to give the other entities enough notice for them to be able to make plans for it too. But I can work with you on all of that. The only reason it's on the agenda is because I just needed someone to tell me
Yeah.
who can make these calls, or if I can just go rogue and do.
So why don't you email me and then
Okay.
you and I can work together on getting that out to commissioners, and we can invite the county commission too if we want to.
Okay,
And yeah, we'll work on that together, you and I.
all right, sounds great.
Thanks, Megan. We have a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Grandpa's got the baby, he's dying.
Maybe.
Mary, you did a nice job.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like when I do it, I'm playing staff and not really.
You did great.
Okay.